I'm Adam,
And I'm Chester.
and this is
Where there's a Williams, there's a way.
Hey Chester, do you know who Martin Luther King Jr. is?
Of course I do. He not only had a dream, but also a federal holiday celebrating him on his birthday.
His I Have a Dream speech is considered to be one of the most influential speeches of the 20th century.
Fun fact, the phrase, I have a dream, was not written down on his original speech.
But that is how the speech is known as.
He had used the line in previous speeches months prior.
So he didn't follow the script?
Perhaps he was inspired by the more than 250,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C., that he started to improvise. Fun fact, he received a C for a grade in public speaking class.
I guess that was another obstacle that he overcame. Regardless, it was a powerful speech with a powerful message of acceptance. In today's book, we get a different view of the famous man. We get a glimpse into his childhood as told by his sister. Let's get started. My Brother Martin, A Sister Remembers Growing Up with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by Christine King Farris, illustrated by Chris Soentpiet. Gather around and listen as I share childhood memories of my brother, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm his older sister and I've known him longer than anyone else. I knew him long before the speeches he gave and the marches he led and the prizes he won. I even knew him before he first dreamed the dream that would change the world. We were born in the same room, my brother Martin and I. I was an early baby, born sooner than expected. Mother dear and Daddy placed me in the chifforobe drawer that stood in the corner of their upstairs bedroom. I got a crib a few days afterward. A year and a half later, Martin spent his first night in the hand-me-down crib in the very same room. The house where we were born belonged to Mother dear's parents, our grandparents, the Reverend and Mrs. A.D. Williams. We lived there with them and our Aunt Ida, our grandmother's sister. And not long after my brother Martin, who we called M.L. because he and Daddy had the same name, our baby brother was born. His name was Alfred Daniel, but we called him A.D. after our grandfather. They called me Christine, and like 3 peas in 1 pod, we grew together. Our days and rooms were filled with adventure stories and tinker toys, with dolls and Monopoly and Chinese checkers. And although Daddy, who was an important minister, and Mother dear, who was known far and wide as a musician, often had work that took them away from home, our grandmother was always there to take care of us. I remember days sitting at her feet, and she and Aunt Ida filled us with grand memories of their childhood and read to us about all the wonderful places in the world. And of course, my brothers and I had each other. We 3 stuck together like the pages of a brand new book. And being normal young children, we were almost always up to something. Our best prank involved a fur piece that belonged to our grandmother. It looked almost alive with its tiny feet and little head and gleaming glass eyes. So every once in a while in the waning light of the evening, we'd tie that fur piece to a stick, and hiding behind the hedge in front of our house, we would dangle it in front of unsuspecting passers-by. Boy, you could hear the screams of fright all across that neighborhood.
It is nice seeing him being a normal kid, playing tricks on his neighbor.
Agreed. I know that I think of Martin Luther King Jr. as a serious man with a somber tone.
Fun fact, did you know that when MLK Jr. was 5 years old, his father, a respected pastor, went on a religious journey around the world?
That's neat.
But that's not the interesting part.
Okay, so what is?
On the voyage, he gained so much inspiration from the Protestant theologian Martin Luther that when he returned to the U.S., he officially changed his and his son's name.
So he wasn't born Martin Luther King Jr.?
Nope.
Wow, that is a fun fact. Then there was the time Mother dear decided that her children should all learn to play piano. I didn't mind too much, but ML and AD preferred being outside to being stuck inside with our piano teacher, Mr. Mann, who would rap your knuckles with a ruler just for playing the wrong notes. Well, one morning, ML and AD decided to loosen the legs on the piano bench so we wouldn't have to practice. We didn't tell Mr. Mann, and when he sat, crash! Down he went. But mostly we were good, obedient children, and ML did learn to play a few songs on the piano. He even went off to sing with our mother a time or two. Given his love for singing and music, I'm sure he would have become as good a musician as our mother, had his life not called him down a different path. But that's just what his life did. My brothers and I grew up a long time ago, back in a time when certain places in our country had unfair laws that said it was right to keep black people separate because our skin was darker and our ancestors had been captured in far-off Africa and brought to America as slaves. Atlanta, Georgia, the city in which we were growing up, had those laws. Because of those laws, my family rarely went to the picture shows or visited Grant Park with its famous cyclorama. In fact, to this very day, I don't recall ever seeing my father on a streetcar. Because of those laws, and the indignity that went with them, Daddy preferred keeping ML, AD, and me close to home where we'd be protected. We lived in a neighborhood in Atlanta that's now called Sweet Auburn. It was named for Auburn Avenue, the street that ran in front of our house. On our side of the street stood two-story frame houses similar to the one we lived in. Across it, crouched in a line of one-story row houses and a store owned by a white family. When we were young, all the children along Auburn Avenue played together, even the two boys whose parents owned the store. And since our house was a favorite gathering place, those boys played with us in our backyard and ran with ML and AD to the firehouse on the corner, where they watched the engines and the firemen. The thought of not playing with those kids because they were different, because they were white and we were black, never entered our minds. Well, one day ML and AD went to get their playmates from across the street just as they had done 100 times before. But they came home alone. The boys had told my brothers that they couldn't play together anymore because AD and ML were Negroes. And that was it. Shortly afterward, the family sold the store and moved away. We never saw or heard from them again. Looking back, I realized that it was only a matter of time before the generations of cruelty and injustice that Daddy and Mother Dear and Mama and Aunt Ida had been shielding us from finally broke through. But back then, it was a crushing blow that seemed to come out of nowhere.
I bet those kids never stopped wanting to be friends.
I bet you're right. Racism is a learned behavior. The neighbor boys probably just wanted to hang out and play baseball, but were only following their parents' orders.
Has there ever been a time where your parents made you do something you didn't agree with?
All the time. I remember wanting to watch something on TV when I was a kid, but my parents told me that it was bedtime. Instead of going to sleep, I kept watching the show from the upstairs landing of my steps.
Not agreeing with the decision is a little different than having a fundamental disbelief.
That's true. As a parent, I try to promote my kids to think for themselves and welcome their thoughts if they're different than my own.
Fun fact, Americans are becoming less racist and homophobic.
I guess Mr. King's message is working. Why do white people treat colored people so mean? ML asked Mother Dear afterward. And with me and ML AD standing in front of her, trying our best to understand, Mother Dear gave the reason behind it all. Her words explained the streetcars our family avoided and the whites-only sign that kept us off the elevator at City Hall. Her words told us why there were parks and museums that black people could not visit, and why some restaurants refused to serve us, and why hotels wouldn't give us rooms, and why theaters would only allow us to watch their picture shows from the balcony. But her words also gave us hope. She answered simply, because they just don't understand that everyone is the same, but someday it will be better. And my brother ML looked up into our mother's face and said the words I remember to this day. He said, "Mother dear, one day I'm going to turn this world upside down." In the coming years, there would be other reminders of the cruel system called segregation that sought to keep black people down. But it was Daddy who showed ML and AD and me how to speak out against hatred and bigotry and stand up for what's right. Daddy was the minister at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and after losing our playmates, when ML, AD, and I heard our father speak from his pulpit, his words held new meaning. And Daddy practiced what he preached. He always stood up for himself when confronted with hatred and bigotry, and each day he shared his encounters at the dinner table. When a shoe salesman told Daddy and ML that he'd only serve them in the back of the store because they were black. Daddy took ML somewhere else to buy new shoes. Another time, a police officer pulled Daddy over and called him boy. Daddy pointed to ML sitting next to him in the car and said, "This is the boy and I'm a man. Until you call me one, I will not listen to you." These stories were nourishing as the food that was set before us. Years would pass and many new lessons would be learned. There would be numerous speeches and marches and prizes. But my brother never forgot the example of our father, or the promise he had made our mother, on the day his friends turned him away. And when he was much older, my brother ML dreamed a dream that turned the world upside down.
Fun fact: Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested 29 times in his 39 years of life.
That's not a very fun fact. Interesting, yes, but fun, no.
He was arrested for traffic violations, loitering, and civil disobedience. All of them seem to stem from his fight against social injustice.
I have to applaud the efforts of someone that's willing to put themselves in harm's way to fight against the wrongs of others.
Fun fact: in 2016, the Orthodox Church declared Martin Luther King Jr. as a saint,
joining his namesake.
Do you think that Dr. King's wish for racial equality has come true?
Unfortunately, no. But I do think that it's much closer to a reality. In his famous speech, he said that he dreamed that one day his children would be judged by their character instead of the color of their skin.
My skin is yellow.
You know what? I never even thought about that until you said it. I just see Chester, a guy filled with fun facts.
Fun fact: I love fun facts.
Speaking of fun things, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I'm Adam.
And I'm Chester.
And this is Where There's a Williams, There's a Way. You Can Be Like Martin, a tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by Mildred D. Johnson. Martin was a peaceful boy and peaceful when a man. He wanted peace for everyone, all throughout our land. You can be a peaceful child, even a peaceful man. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. Martin was an intelligent boy, intelligent when a man. He wanted good schools for everyone, all throughout our land. You can be an intelligent child, even an intelligent man. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. Martin was a proud boy and proud when he became a man. He tried to teach pride to black people all throughout our land. You can be a proud child and proud when you're a man. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. Martin was a reading boy, kept reading when a man. He knew good readers were needed all throughout our land. You can be a reader, read when you're a man. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. Martin was a speaking boy, kept speaking when a man. His words touched many listeners all throughout our land. You can be a speaker. Speak on when you're a man. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. Martin was a praying boy. How he prayed when he was a man. He prayed that men would do right deeds all throughout our land. You can pray in your own way. Pray more when you're a man. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. Martin had a dream, that all people would be free to live and work together in a country filled with peace. You can be a dreamer. Keep dreaming when a man. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. When Martin Luther King was a warrior of love, a kind and loving man, he wanted all to be loving all throughout our land. You can be kind and loving, grow to a loving man. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. Martin Luther King sang, "We shall overcome." Sing it throughout our land. You can overcome, my children. Yes, you can. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. You can be like Martin. Yes, you can. Afterward. This book is written as an accurate reflection on the childhood experiences of my brother Martin, the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Although many stories have been told about Martin's childhood, this one is firsthand. As the sole survivor of the family into which Martin Luther King Jr. was born, I feel it is important to share some true, funny, intriguing elements of Martin's earlier days. No other document can share this true story. Many see Martin as a very serious-minded individual, stiff-necked and always focused. What has not been emphasized enough is that Martin was once a boy. He, like others, developed gradually, He was funny, he was curious, he liked to play, he was a regular fella. I wanted to reflect another side of Martin's life story. The days that I spent with him, watching him as we grew older, were valuable and meaningful exercises for me. They set him on his ultimate course. He indeed became a world leader. His contribution to the world cannot be denied or ignored, and it is important for young people to realize the potential that lies within each of them to do this and greater works. I believe that a poem by Mildred D. Johnson entitled "You Can Be Like Martin" reflects my feeling on this regard. The highlight of this book, I think, is a moment that Martin expressed his commitment to effect change. Perhaps the information contained in this book will inspire young people to become leaders of the future. Aside from my memories of Martin's earlier years, I owe it to him to tell the full story. We had a great time as kids. I miss those days. The memories I share here to help to bring those times back and ensure that they are available for generations to come. Christine King Farris, June 2002. For those who continue to preserve the legacy of Dr. King's dream, C.S. Illustrator's note. In May of 1999, while making a presentation for the International Reading Association in San Diego, California, I had the honor and pleasure of being introduced to Miss Christine King Farris. She attended my presentation and afterward asked me if I would be interested in working with her on a project, a book about her childhood with her brother, the late Dr. Martin Luther King. I was incredibly flattered. As a youngster, I had idolized his remarkable human being. Mrs. Farris and I kept in contact, and before long, her editor at Simon & Schuster contacted me. Within a matter of days, my brother Martin went underway. My first course of action was a trip to the King Center in Atlanta, Georgia, where Mrs. Farris, our editor, and I walked through the place of Dr. King's childhood. His childhood home at 501 Auburn Avenue, Ebenezer Baptist Church, where he and his father served as minister, and even the neighborhood firehouse, where he and his friends spent much of their time. I snapped photographs and listened while Mrs. Farris regaled us with recollections of a very playful and sometimes mischievous little boy who would grow up to change the world. I was moved beyond words and left Atlanta with the feeling of being a part of something historic. A few months later, after the manuscript was completed, I took a second trip from New York City to Atlanta. This time, I brought my studio with me, cameras, lighting equipment, backdrops, and costumes. In preparation for an extensive model shoot, Mrs. Farris, the epitome of Southern graciousness and charm, greeted me at Ebenezer Baptist Church. There she had gathered models she had personally chosen to bring her memories to life. The boys who pose as Martin Jr. and A.D. are both Mrs. Farris's grandnephews. Mrs. Farris's daughter, Dr. King's niece, portrayed Mother Dear, Dr. King's mother, and the current pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church portrays Daddy King. Even Christine's young granddaughter was an eager model and portrays a young Christine. The rest of the cast were personal and close friends to the King family. Many shared stories of their time with Dr. King, ML as they refer to him, and each agreed their participation was a great tribute to the King family and their legacy. The spirit and generosity of Mrs. Farris and the staff of both the Ebenezer Baptist Church and the National Historic Site and the King family helped to make my work on my brother Martin as genuine as I think possible. It is my hope that the part I played in the creation of this book helps Dr. King's vision of justice and harmony live on and on. Chris Soentpiet, June 2002, New York, New York. Mrs. Farris's acknowledgments. This book would not have been possible without an encouragement of my loving and devoted husband, Isaac Farris Sr., and my precious children, Isaac Farris Jr., Dr. Angela Farris Watkin. Because of their abiding spirits, I acknowledge my parents, Martin Luther King Sr. and Alberta Williams King, for making our way possible. I'm also grateful for the ongoing support of my dear sister-in-law, Coretta Scott King, and Naomi Barbara King. They stood by my brother in the struggle for freedom, raised their children single-handedly, and remained steadfast and true. Finally, I thank those who posed as models for the illustrations, my granddaughter, Farris Christine Watkins, my great-nephews, Uriah and Gabriel Ellis, and Ebenezer Baptist Church members Jethro and Uretha English, Dr. Dolores Robinson, Reverend James Victor, Brenda Davenport, Carl Terry, and Gwendolyn Bunn. Did you know Martin Luther King skipped 2 grades and entered college at the age of 15? He was admitted to Morehouse College in 1944 and graduated in 1948 with a BA in sociology at the age of 19.